You watching this. I can almost guarantee that you love a good combat system. As do I. The brutal murder of killing someone will never not bring me joy. Wait, no! But is it just the brutal murder that leaves us coming back to add to our kill count? Well, not exactly. It's something we have to pick apart into many tiny pieces, and that is something I've had to do in my game Halls of Perished, as I've created and built upon my combat system. If you want to see more of the game and stay up to date, go join the Discord down below. In today's long awaited yet hopefully worth it video, I'll be taking a deep dive into the key components of a fun combat system, as well as the steps I've taken to replicate that satisfaction for my game. Stay tuned to the end of the video so I can show you the different enemies currently in my game and their cool combat patterns. Hey guys, Blakey here and welcome back. As always, it has been a while, I've been busy, etc, etc. I'm not even going to bother with that anymore. But listen, I do have an actual excuse now. I do spend many hours of the day working on this game and can happily say it is my favourite project I've ever worked on. And the updates I've got to show you in the next video are amazing. But anyway, enough about that. So what even is a combat system? Well, a combat system in games, if you're unaware, is a system and mechanic in which players and AI characters can interact with each other through combat and deal damage. Even with this simple explanation, it can be enough to give players a sense of immersion that other games may lack, as they become aware of their vulnerability. If done incorrectly, however, combat systems can feel sluggish, boring, slow, and just overall not fun to play with. So the first thing I had to keep in mind before I started development of one is how I want it to feel. Did I want fast gameplay? Slow hits, combos, variation? So I began with a prototype of a player and a dummy. You may have seen these guys in the last video, so let's talk about how they interact. With this longsword, I can attack the dummy and do damage in variations of 3, with 2 different swing animations currently. And before you fly to the comments, these are placeholder animations. Do not start butchering my lovely animations. I am well aware of the bonk nature of them. If we strip away everything but the pure hit on the dummy, you can see there is quite a difference. The sword just flies for the enemy and does damage. Now for those of you wondering, the game checks if the player is currently swinging its sword, and if it is and it collides with an enemy, take away a set health amount from them. But as of now, you can't tell if the enemy's lost damage, and even if you could, he seems like he just brushed it off, because the game did not tell the player that the hit is registered. In short, there was no response from our enemy. And that is where animations come in. Even without anything else, an animation can go a long way, as this is all we needed to show that the player is registering hits. Now I'll give you bonus points if you can make your animations look better than my mighty training dummy animation. You can slander my swords all you want, but the dummy's class. I bet you can't. Now one key aspect of my combat system is that there are many different weapons to choose from, and each one of those weapons has a low damage, a high damage and a critical hit. This means if I had just 6 weapons, that's, 6 times 3, that's 12, no way, that's 16 different damage variations, giving players a combination of choice and chance to take into battle and training. But let's break it down and just focus on this weapon for now. So in short, variation can go a long way, as if players are on their last breath and need one more big hit for the final enemy, they can pray that they land a critical hit, and that lack of guarantee can create a much more intense surface along the battlefield. So great, we have cool weapons. We have our beaten up training dummy. You know what, let's call him Dave for the sake of simplicity. So Dave takes a wobble every time he's hit, but that's about it. So first plan of action, if we have damage variation, I wanted the player to know each hit the damage they had done. And this can be great when we add things like power ups and perks to our current damage. So I created a game object that spits out whatever damage we just did to our enemy, and we spawn in a copy of it on Dave every time we hit him. And then that little game object slowly floats away into the air, as we don't want it sticking around and being the centre of attention, as that should always be me. That should always be the enemy's visual response. Now, we have a hit, we have an animation, and a visual damage amount. How about we get to the fun part and we give him some game juice, as this is what's going to make our hit feel impactful, and not just be impactful. So firstly, to me, what's always, and I mean always a necessity, is camera movement. Whether that be it moving up and down, left and right, or just a strong camera shake, it's always good to add it to certain points. So now, we have the camera going nuts for a split second on each hit. Now every time Dave is whacked, the player feels that hit. Even if it is just a swing animation, it feels impactful. But this wouldn't be a retro 2D game if it didn't have damage flash, as seen in many 2D games. and it looks great. I honestly can't explain why this is good for a combat system, because it doesn't even really make sense. Like, why does an enemy typically flash white, other than visual response? If I was to take a hit in real life, I would certainly not flash white. But then again, I also wouldn't have the amount of damage come out of me as a number in front of me and float away, so you know, I can't question it. Anyway, I used a shader for this. The game uses this shader, sets the enemy's material to this shader briefly on hit, and reverts the material back to what it originally was. And now that looks great. Poor Dave, he gets hit again, but he looks great when doing so, you know, he has no right to complain. Now, when I tell you one word that no game can be without, and I cannot stress enough the sheer importance of this word in games enough, is particles. Particles are everywhere in my game. They're on the player. They're used as blood. They're used as rain, drips, sparks, fog, light shafts, everything. But on an enemy, they look great, as it really looks like the enemy is getting chipped away on each hit. Just like this. Dave has a bunch of mini Daves flying away from him on every hit. And for extra flair, they land on the floor and stay for a few seconds before waving their goodbyes to the other Daves. Nice. Now I hope you can see the difference from this to this. It looks great and it feels impactful, but there's more to a combat system than just this. I needed to build this system in such a way that it is easily customizable and expandable. Why? Because I have many enemies, currently 8 different enemies with different looks and attack patterns and different damage and health. I don't want to have to do a bunch of different stuff every time I want to add a new enemy. 1, that is repetitive, and 2, that's just not good code practice if you have to do that. I have a system implemented in which if I want to add a new enemy, I can put it in the game, give it the enemy script, add it to the list of possible enemies to spawn, and it will automatically do all the things Dave can on a hit and can die after it loses all the health I set it. That is the key. Building a system that is reusable and efficient. Now the biggest part of a combat system is of course the enemies themselves. So now I'm going to show you just a few of the enemies in my game and take a deep dive into their impact on my combat system. Starting off with one of my favourite enemies, Willow. Now Willow is an enemy that poses a threat to our player using his magic wand, and this wand locates the player and spawns in a bomb above the player and explodes if it hits him. Now how does the player know when to prepare for the attack? Well, simple. The enemy telegraphs his attack right before he does it with an animation. He waves his wand for a second, telling the player it's time to kindly leave. Without this small feature, players would quickly get frustrated with the difficulty of enemies. Even Dark Souls has enemies that telegraph their attacks, as without it, enemies become impossible to predict and react to. Now that's great, but I wanted the player to have to not just move left or right, but have to really take a second to think about what they're going to do before they do it. So I added a chance meter in which Willow may spawn a bomb to the right of the player instead of above it, and move it towards the player on spawn. This means players cannot just move right as they risk walking into a bomb. So not only is there player attack variation, but enemy attack variation also, making it harder for combat to become boring. Now I'm going to combine this with another enemy, currently unnamed, so we're going to call him Spike. Now Spike is not a hard enemy to defeat, but something I always kept in mind is to have enemies in place to just make it awkward for the player, as the Spike on its own is not hard, but if you combine this with 2 Willows, the battlefield quickly becomes interesting. Spike is simple, a rolling enemy with sharp branches and will do a solid amount of damage on the player if they collide and then roll back. He is super slow and easily avoidable, just don't leave him to slowly chase you while you take out other enemies, as you might pay the price. So this combat system features many different weapons with different damage amounts, different enemies with different attack patterns and damage amounts, as well as a whole bunch of game juice in between to make each hit feel impactful. Everything we explained today was built in my game to ensure players do not get bored, yet can recognise different attack patterns, and that is a hard, fine balance which I'm still fine tuning every day. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to hear more about Halls of Perished, go follow me on Instagram, Twitter and add the Discord. All of that. Lads, I'll thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.